vibrations of consciousness. And this unmanifest structure of consciousness, these silent sounds reverberating, this, by the way, is called Veda in the traditional language of meditation. Veda is the sound of silence. Veda is the self-interacting dynamics of consciousness, self-interacting dynamics of unity murmuring within itself, reverberating within itself. And the reverberations of consciousness, or Veda, open to direct experience by anyone, in any age, of any culture, or any educational background. Just experiencing transcendental consciousness or pure consciousness again and again, twice a day, for a period of time, develops more and more acute sensitivity in the experience of this silence, to the point where the delicate reverberations of silence are perceptible and innumerable. And they've all been mapped out. Since time immemorial, they've been mapped out in the structure of what is called Veda, the Rig Veda, the foundational aspect of the Vedic literature described as the blueprint of the universe, or the constitution of the universe in the language of His Holiness Maharshi Mahesh Yogi. If you look at the structure of silence, the self-interacting dynamics of consciousness, or Veda, open to direct experience in the simplest silent state of consciousness, you see that there are 192 fundamental reverberant states of consciousness, fundamental vibrational degrees of freedom of consciousness. The number 192 is fundamental. That is the number of syllables in the first sukta of the Rig Veda. That is the number of suktas or chapters in the first mandala of the Rig Veda. That is the number of suktas or chapters in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda. The whole Veda is built upon this blueprint of 192. So this is a whole science of sequential unfoldment of unity to diversity. The whole Vedic science has been elucidated and elaborated in a scientific way in this scientific age by world-renowned Vedic scientist and scientist of consciousness, Maharshi. It's a whole science of the sequential unfoldment of unity to diversity, parallel to sequential, spontaneous symmetry breaking of modern physics, but frankly even more elaborately unfolded and certainly more accessible to the mind. But the structure of 192, the abstract, reverberant sounds of silence, the self-interacting dynamics of consciousness, again matches precisely the vibrational degrees of freedom of the superstring, showing again quantitatively the identity of our own pure consciousness, the meditative state, as the direct experience of this unified field of existence at the basis of the universe. So it's a very, very fundamental discovery. I've taken some time to lay it out for you quantitatively and qualitatively. But the important finding is, with immense practical significance for the development of the human brain, for the development and culturing of unity in human experience and unity and harmony in human behavior, for the dynamics of peace on earth and the prevention of war, as we'll see in just a moment, this discovery is critical. Human awareness, properly cultured, and easily so, has the fundamental capability of expanding to identify with the unified field, experiencing and living the scientific truth of the unity of life. Let me say it again. It's an absolutely fundamental discovery of world-transforming significance. Human awareness, properly cultured and easily so, is fundamentally capable of experiencing the unified field and living the scientific truth of the unity of life in all of one's thoughts, in all of one's behavior towards others, providing the foundation for a unified field-based civilization, a foundation for a unified and peaceful world. Let's talk about the practical impact of all of this. First, I would like to introduce in just one slide, because time now is very limited, the beginning of a discussion to be taken up later of how this physical brain, how the human nervous system can experience such a fundamental level of reality. What is it in the structure of the human brain that makes it different from a rock or different from a grasshopper, that gives us the capability of knowing the ultimate reality, living the truth of the unity of life? Well, it has to do with the very structure and function of the brain, as illuminated most graphically in the groundbreaking work of Professor Dr. Tony Nader, MD, PhD, foremost medical scientist, foremost neurophysiologist, really foremost scientist of our generation. He has explored, as I'll show you in a moment, the detailed mechanisms, physiological, neurophysiological mechanisms, which uphold the experience of unity. And that very, very fundamental discovery and analysis of the human brain, and analysis of the human nervous system, is so important for understanding the innate capability of the human mind to experience and live unity, that he has been honored as the international president of the Global Union of Scientists for Peace, due to the profound global impact of his world-transforming discovery. A glimpse of that discovery is briefly provided here in just one slide, excerpted from an extraordinary 600-page treatise, in which he explores the entire structure of the brain and the whole human physiology, and see that that structure is designed to uphold the experience of unity, designed to uphold the experience of the unified field. For example, this chart shows the correlation between the 192 vibrational degrees of freedom of the superstring, which is the 192 sounds of the Veda, and the 192 ascending and descending reticular formations of the human nervous system, the nerve endings, which are the gateways to consciousness. This correlation is one of many within the brain and throughout the physiology that shows that the hardware of the human brain is designed to mirror the structure and function of the universe. That the structure and function of the constitution of the universe, the structure and dynamics of the unified field, is directly mirrored in the structure and function of the human brain and human nervous system, such that, properly cultured, with access to the proper software, through proper education to access our cosmic hardware, every human being, every human brain has the capability of resonating in this total structure of life, resonating in this total structure of the constitution of the universe, and living concretely the fundamental truth of the unity of life in higher states of consciousness, in which the total brain is developed holistically and an individual lives his or her full potential. So this is with respect to the individual. Now let us finish this discussion by talking about society. In particular, the point of this first conference is preventative defense, preventing war and social violence, including terrorism, by diffusing the acute societal tensions, the religious and political and ethnic tensions that fuel violence and terrorism and war. How can we do this? Well, let me remind you first that it is widely accepted now in the field of conflict resolution that the first stage in the outbreak of war, the first step, is mounting tensions among the rival factions, particularly in critical hotspots throughout the world. If you could actually target and neutralize those rising tensions, you would be neutralizing the very causative fact of war. Neutralizing war at its basis, so that the enmity doesn't arise to the point that enemies are born, preventing the very birth of an enemy. Extraordinary and highly practical, if it were just possible. And of course, the research shows that it is not only possible, but practical and even easy. Let me remind you very quickly about the empirical research on this, and then we'll return to the mechanisms of how this works physically. Well, I've already showed this one study, and I'll just remind you that this publication in the Yale Journal of Conflict Resolution sparked an entire industry. It really sparked a firestorm in the field of sociological research. It showed that, several hundred people to 1,000 people in Jerusalem were enough to produce a palpable, unmistakable transformation in the level of peace and calm and quality of life in Israel and in neighboring Lebanon, to the point where people woke up in the morning and simply didn't feel motivated to go out and commit violent acts. The result? 80% drop in war deaths, war injuries, profound progress towards peace, and so forth, on the very days and the days following large groups of individuals meditating together. I'll explain the together in just a moment. This chart, which resulted in a reduction of war that was highly statistically significant, caused the editors of the Journal of Conflict Resolution to publish this paper along with a letter urging the scientific community to rush out and repeat this experiment, urging other scientific colleagues and collaborators to go back to the Middle East and stop the war temporarily through this meditative intervention. And as a result, over the next 821 days, over the next 2.25 years, 7 scientific expeditions, 7 scientific collaborations were assembled where thousands of individuals, as many as 8,000 at a time, were assembled into peace-promoting, coherence-creating groups of meditating experts, dedicating long hours, morning and afternoon, to producing as much of a peaceful influence as possible through their meditation and collective meditation effect to diffuse the social enmity and put an end to war. And in every one of these experiments shown in this chart, there was a highly statistically significant drop in war, an immediate drop in war. You can read just barely, I think, the T factors, which are essentially standard deviations, and each of these peace-promoting assemblies were statistically significant and had effect sizes of about 5, 4, and 4, and 5, and 3, and 4, and 5 standard deviations. That is a huge effect, about an 80% drop on average in war deaths, war-related injuries, and marked progress towards peace in the Middle East during these peace-promoting assemblies, but not at any other time. That final bar on the left-hand side of this chart, the small negative bar, shows the average trend of events in the 2.25-year period, which was a slight escalation in conflict, except during the 7 experimental periods of the meditative interventions. Now let's talk a little bit about how this works. Of course we know, on again a very heuristic level at first, that no man is an island. We inevitably affect one another. We have a profound influence on our families, on our friends, on our work environments, and if enough people are involved in such a meditative group, a profound influence that trickles throughout the whole society. This is the inevitable spillover effect of meditation. I'll talk about the mechanisms of it in a moment, but some of the mechanisms are frankly fairly obvious. Especially in a densely knit urban environment like Washington, D.C., New York City, Jerusalem, etc., people are very tightly interconnected, especially today with the internet and the media and telecommunications. The whole world is a shrinking world. The whole world really is a family. So inevitably we expect a spillover effect into society, but remarkably, the research shows a very fortunate and very dramatic amplification effect of the calming influence of meditation, peace-promoting influence of meditation, when the individual meditators practicing transcendental meditation and certain advanced techniques called the TM Siddhi program, including a technique called yogic flying, when these powerful meditation techniques are practiced together, techniques that have been derived from the Vedic literature specifically for their ability to dispel negativity in the environment. What we find is that the radiated influence of calm from such a coherence-creating group grows not linearly with the number of meditators in the group, but quadratically. This is very important and not unexpected. For the very same reason that 2 loudspeakers radiating the same sound in close physical proximity, or as this chart shows, 3 loudspeakers in close physical proximity, each one broadcasting the same music in coherent phase, and again in close physical proximity, produces 9 times the sound of a single loudspeaker. That's because those sound amplitudes add coherently if the speakers are close together. And that coherent summation of amplitudes leads to a combined amplitude 3 times as large, and as we all know, the power in a sound wave grows as the square of the amplitude, giving rise to 9 times the sound volume as you would get from a single loudspeaker. Same thing would be true of 3 radio antennas broadcasting an electromagnetic signal. Those antennas are often moved together within a certain very short distance,